Prometheus and Pandora. Prometheus, the Titan, and his brother Epimetheus were given the task of creating man and all the other animals. Epimetheus gave courage, strength, swiftness, and wisdom to different animals. To some he gave wings, to some he gave claws, and others he covered in a protective shell. When he came to make men, Epimetheus had nothing to give them. So he asked his brother for help. Prometheus flew up to heaven to light a torch from the sun. The fire he brought back made man superior to all other animals. With it, he was able to make weapons to hunt wild beasts and tools to farm the land. He used fire to warm his home and keep out the cold. When Zeus realized that Prometheus had stolen the fire of the gods and given it to mortals, he was filled with anger. Zeus commanded Hephaestus to fashion a woman, and he named her Pandora. He then sent her to Prometheus and Epimetheus. He wanted to punish them for stealing his fire. Because she was made in heaven, every god in heaven contributed something to make her perfect. Aphrodite, goddess of love, gave her beauty. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, gave her persuasion. And Apollo, god of poetry and music, gave her lyrics and verse. When she arrived on the earth, Epimetheus immediately fell in love with her. They married soon after. But Prometheus was suspicious of Zeus's real reason for sending Pandora to them. He warned his brother that Zeus was their enemy, and they must never believe him. But Epimetheus ignored the warning. In his house, Epimetheus kept a box, but its contents he kept secret from everyone. Pandora was curious to know what was in it. So one day when Epimetheus was out hunting, she found the box and opened it. Plague, famine, misery, despair, hatred, warfare, and many other forms of suffering escaped into the world. She desperately tried to close the lid, but they were quickly scattered around the world by the winds. Hope was all that was left. There is another story that is told more often. It says that Pandora brought a box that Zeus had given her. She was warned that she must never open the box, but Pandora was also gifted with curiosity. She could not stand not knowing what was in the box. When she opened it, all sorts of hideous winged creatures came flying out of the box so fast. After Pandora slammed the lid shut, she heard a small fluttering sound from inside the box. Her curiosity caused her to lift the lid once more. A small creature with golden wings flew out. Its name was Hope.
Pygmalion. Pygmalion, the king of Cyprus, blamed women for all that was wrong with the world. He decided not to marry because he mistrusted them. He was a brilliant sculptor and had carved a beautiful woman out of ivory. No living woman could compare to the beauty and perfection of his statue. She was so lifelike that he forgot he had carved her from ivory and fell in love with her. He would often lay her gently on a soft feathery couch to caress her smooth, cold body. He gave her gifts of polished gems, flowers, beads, and amber. He clothed her in fine silks and slipped gold and silver rings on her fingers. Around her neck he draped strings of pearls. Over time, his distrust of women faded, and he began to call her his wife. He prayed to Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty.
"Oh, goddess of love,"
he whispered,
"please give me a wife like the beautiful ivory virgin I created."
Aphrodite heard him. She knew that he was in love with his ivory creation, so, as a gesture of goodwill, she granted his wish. The next day, when Pygmalion returned home, he kissed his ivory wife on the mouth. He was shocked to feel warmth in the lips that had always been cold, and ivory arms that were smooth and soft beneath his fingers.
"It must be a dream,"
he thought. He kept watching and touching her to make sure it was not just a dream. The beautiful, perfect woman he had created was indeed alive and waiting to be held in his arms. When he kissed her again, his ivory virgin blushed and opened her eyes and stared at her love. Pygmalion thanked Aphrodite for granting his wish, and she blessed their marriage. When their first son was born, he was named Paphos, after a city in Cyprus sacred to Aphrodite.
Phaeton and the Sun Chariot. Phaeton was the son of Apollo, god of the sun, and the nymph Clymene. One day a friend laughed at the idea that Apollo was his father. Phaeton became angry and ran home to ask his mother to tell him the truth.
"I need proof that I really am of heavenly birth,"
he cried.
"My honor is at stake, mother."
"I call the sun to witness that I have told you the truth, my son,"
she said.
"If I lie, let me be blinded by its rays. But you must go to your father Apollo and demand the truth from him."
Phaeton was obsessed with his desire to find out the truth. He immediately traveled to the Palace of the Sun in India to find his father. When Phaeton arrived, he was stunned by the great marble columns, solid gold roof, and polished ivory ceilings of the palace. Phaeton climbed up the steep slope and entered the home of the sun god. He saw Apollo seated on a throne that glittered with diamonds. Apollo noticed Phaeton standing quietly before him.
"Why have you come?"
he asked.
"Oh, light of the wide world, Apollo,"
said Phaeton.
"please give me some proof that you are my father."
"Come closer, my son,"
said Apollo.
"Your mother is right. I am your father. And to put an end to your doubts, I will grant you any wish that you desire."
"If you are truly my father, let me drive your great chariot of the sun,"
said Phaeton. Apollo immediately regretted his hasty promise and shook his head.
"I have spoken rashly,"
he said.
"I cannot grant that wish. It is dangerous for a mortal to drive my heavy flaming chariot, and you are not strong enough. Even Zeus, who hurls the thunderbolts, is incapable of doing so."
But Phaeton cried,
"I have inherited some of your mighty power, and I am much stronger than you think."
"But heaven is constantly turning around,"
said Apollo.
"You can't possibly keep your course while the earth is revolving under you. Even with all my power, I find it difficult to control my fire-breathing horses. What will you do when you meet the monsters along the way? You will pass by the horns of the bull, the lion's jaws, and when you see the terrifying scorpion and the crab pointing in different directions, you may lose your way. Don't become obsessed with something you cannot possibly control. Surely my fears for you prove that you are my son.
I believe you, Father.
said Phaeton.
But now let me prove I am your rightful son.
Look around you and choose something less dangerous.
Cried Apollo.
I know I have sworn to grant your wish, but I beg you to choose more wisely.
But Phaeton would not change his mind, so Apollo led him to his large chariot. Phaeton was dazzled by the sight of the golden chariot with its silver wheels and rows of sparkling diamonds. As the early dawn appeared in the east, Apollo and Phaeton watched as the stars withdrew from the sky to rest until the following night. While his horses were harnessed to the chariot, Apollo covered Phaeton's face with a special potion to save his skin from the sun's flames.
Now, remember to hold the reins tightly,
said Apollo.
The horses are very fast and are difficult to control, so only use the whip to correct their direction. Keep in the middle zone and avoid the northern and southern regions, and follow the wheel marks that you see on the path. Don't go too high, or you will burn the heavenly dwellings, and don't go too low, or you will set the earth on fire. It is safer to take the middle course.
The horses snorted and stamped their feet impatiently. Phaeton jumped into the chariot, and with a flick of the reins, the chariot darted forward to outrun the morning breezes. Despite his father's advice, Phaeton couldn't remember how to guide the horses, and he soon realized that he didn't have enough strength to control them. When Phaeton looked down at the earth, his knees began to shake with fright. Then his eyesight began to fade in the bright sunlight.
Oh, why did I question my parentage?
He thought anxiously.
Why was I so obsessed with the idea of taking this journey?
Phaeton felt powerless, and all he could do was pray for survival. Phaeton's courage completely disappeared when he saw the monsters scattered around the surface of heaven. The reins fell from Phaeton's hands, and the horses pulled the fiery chariot up to the heavens, and then down to scrape the earth. The clouds began to smoke, and the plants and trees withered and burned. The fields became parched with the fierce heat, and the harvest was set ablaze. Great cities perished, and their people were turned to ashes. The mountains burned, and the earth's water dried up. Phaeton saw that the world was on fire, and smelled the burning ashes in the air. Libya became a desert, and remains same today. The great Nile River fled and hid its source in the desert, where it still remains hidden today. The sea shrank, and when Poseidon swam to the surface, he was driven back by the searing heat. Dolphins and fish had to find deeper waters to survive. As the earth slowly died, she looked up to the heaven and called to Zeus.
Oh, the ruler of the gods, don't let me perish from the sun's fire. I have always given you fertile soil to provide food for the cattle and for the men who tend them. You may believe that I am unworthy, but what have the rivers, seas, and lakes done to deserve such a fate? Atlas, who holds me aloft, is exhausted from the heat, and his great arms now quiver and threaten to collapse. If the sea, the earth, and the heavens perish, the whole universe will fall into chaos. Only you can save the earth, Zeus.
Zeus heard the earth's pleas and called all the gods together, including Apollo. He climbed up his lofty tower from where he usually directed the clouds, but there were no clouds to be seen. He sent his thunder echoing around the earth before he fired a lightning bolt at his great chariot. Phaeton's hair caught fire, and he, the horses, and flaming chariot fell like a shooting star into the great river, Eridanus. He was burnt alive before the waters cooled his burning body. Phaeton was determined to undertake something that he was clearly unsuited to. This is a warning to all of us that we must know our limits and never overestimate our abilities.